Okay, everyone, we're going to get started. Let me start with some introductions. My name is Rance Smith. I am the sales engineer here at vCloud. I'm a part of the product development team. I work alongside John McBride. If you've been to any of our other webinars, he is the manager over product development. I work alongside Alex Reed. He is a technical writer. He will be handling the demo and basically giving you an overview of vCloud 9.7. I just want to remind everyone that you are muted. So if you have any questions, please hold them until the end, and you can actually put them in the chat if you needed to as well, and we'll address that towards the end. I'll go ahead and hand it over to Alex here.
Sure. So this is Alex from vCloud. Just to go over a little bit of housekeeping first. You guys are all eligible for gift cards for attending. If you are a call-in only attendee, you can. We'll remind you at the end. But call-in attendees can shoot us an email just to make sure that you get registered for those gift cards. So jumping into the content, what I'm going to go ahead and first go over is what we had to do in order to facilitate upgrade to vCloud 9.7. This was a pretty extensive update for us. It represented a lot of underlying vSphere and NSX networking component upgrades. So our engineering department's been hard at work for the last few months, getting those all upgraded and standardized across all 6 of our data centers. Additionally, we upgraded our network and storage architecture to take advantage of some of the new features in vCloud 9.7. And we also went ahead and revamped our data center design. So a lot of our hardware, made sure we had all of our redundancies in place and standardized the hardware units we were using also across all of our data centers. So this was a big effort in a lot of different parts of the company. I wanted to make sure that all of those were represented here. So jumping into the new features for vCloud 9.7, just looking at the interface itself, which we're going to do here in a couple of minutes in the live demos, you'll see that the interface is very streamlined. It's going to use HTML, so no more Flash. You're not going to need to enable that outdated plugin in your browsers anymore. It will all be native. Independent disks are supported now in vCloud 9.7. That's something that was missing in the old interface. You'll see there's the ability to do integrated in-browser uploads. So that terrible client integration plugin has also been deprecated. You don't have to use that to upload OVFs or anything anymore. OVF tool is still available if you want to use it, that command line tool, but the in-browser uploads work really well. The advanced edge gateways are now native to 9.7. In the old interface, they would actually pop out a new window for the advanced edge gateway. Now it's fully integrated into the HTML5 interface. And the network configuration is also improved. So they revamped just some of the wording and the menu diving in the network configuration interface to make that a little bit easier. So we're going to see all these new features in this workflow demo that I'm going to hop over to in just a second here. We're going to look at managing users and permissions in the new interface, as well as we're going to look at what it takes to create a routed network and create a VM from a template. So these are actually all going to be pretty quick, just because of how easy to use the new demo or the new interface is. So you all give me just a second while I go ahead and pull that up here. All right, so this is the new vCloud Director interface. When we sent out this webinar invite, we mentioned that in order to get the most out of this webinar, you would want to have been familiar with some of the vCloud workflows already. If you're not, some of this may be a little bit deep, but I'm going to try and give a pretty surface level overview and then work through some of the more technical workflows, just so you guys can kind of get a little bit more acquainted with what it takes to spin up VMs and things like that in here. So this is the screen that you'll be landed at. You can see already it's a completely different interface. You've got this navigation bar here at the top. We have our virtual data center here right in front of us, showing us what our resources are like. This is where you actually review how much of your resources are being consumed by the VMs that are running. You can see a summary up here as well in the upper right. So if I hop into our virtual data center here, you can see again, just a completely different interface. You have the navigation bar here on the left instead of across the top. You have different categories where we have our virtual machines and VFs, followed by networking, storage, and then our vCloud settings. We have our virtual machine here, just an example virtual machine running in our test environment. And we have the same kind of interface where we can click on the screen in order to pull up a console into that VM. So we have that functioning. We have our VM information right here. We have all our actions on that VM available one click in on this initial interface. So looking at our workflow here, when you first log into your BDC, one thing you're probably going to want to do is set up your internal users. So I'm going to hop over to administration here, clicking on this hamburger icon to open up the alternative views from data centers. We can also look at administration here to look at our users. This is pretty straightforward, sort of like the old vCloud interface where you can go ahead and set up a new user, set up all the contact information for that user. One way that this interface is different from the old one, though, is how deep the roles go. So you can see there are a lot of built-in roles here. When I create a new one, it gives me access to all of these individual permissions. So you can go very deep in customizing these roles. This is pretty new. A lot of these access roles were not available or were not visible, at least, in the old vCloud interface. You have a lot of stuff that you can assign to users. You have very granular permissions here that you can assign to different groups of users. So I definitely recommend clicking through all of these. There's way too many options for us to go over all of the individual options here today, but I did want to draw your attention to the fact that all these do exist now. You don't have to rely on just the basic built-in roles. You can create your own, and they go really deep here. So that's looking at creating users and roles. Again, most of these menus are only one click deep. It's mostly about finding your bearings here on the left, and then your action buttons here up at the top. So I'm going to hop back over to the data center section here. I'm going to go back into our virtual data center. I'm going to look at networking now. So if you've used the original, the old vCloud Director interface, you'll be familiar with the org BDC networks, and you'll know that it takes several clicks into the administration tab to get anywhere close to networking. In this interface, networking is right here. You just hop over to networks. We have an example network here. You click on add. It takes you through a very similar wizard. You'll see this kind. You've probably seen this kind of wizard before. I enter some of this information here. It'll check my my gateway here. So it'll make sure that I'm entering everything correctly. It'll say whether or not the network is shared within the organization. I can just click through next here. Because this is a routed network, I can attach it to our edge gateway, which I'll click and do that in just a second as well. Clicking through all of these, you can see we can set our static IP pool here, and then we can also set up our DNS once we're done with that. So it's the same steps as the original interface. It's just different aesthetics and a little bit more accessible. Hopping over to edge gateways as well. As you may know, edge gateways are one of the virtual routers we offer. They are native to vCloud. We also offer things like Cisco SABs and other IDS virtual router solutions. But this is the native solution. Is the edge gateway. And instead of having to jump into 5 different edge gateway menus, right-click properties, or any of that, once you click on the edge gateway here, you have all the networking information here. You have all the IP pools, anything like that. The external networks the edge gateway is routed to are available right here as well. And your sub-allocated IP addresses. So no more menu diving to find those either. Those are right here in this service level menu. And then if you go into configure services, this is where that HTML5 advanced edge interface from the previous interface is built in. So this is that same advanced edge pop-up. If you've not seen the advanced edge menu before, this is a much improved edge gateway management interface where you have access to a bunch of different kinds of NAT rules, routing, load balancing, firewall rules. These are broken out much more like the Cisco SAB is. So I definitely recommend poking around in there if you haven't had the chance to check out the advanced edge. All the edges in our IaaS should now be advanced edges. That was part of the upgrade process to vCloud 9.7. So you'll all have access to that interface. Even if you don't use this 9.7 interface, if you use the old Flash one, this will still pop up in a new window when you edit your edge gateway. So that's why I wanted to go over that here as well. And then finally, one thing I want to do is just show you the app spin up process. This is also going to be abbreviated compared to the old vCloud interface. I clicked on vApps here, and I can go ahead and add a new vApp. I'm going to call it test vApp. And I'm going to add a virtual machine to it. So if you're not familiar with vApps and vCloud, those are just containers for VMs. I click add virtual machine. This is going to give me the ability to spin up a new virtual machine from a template. You can see we have 2019 here as a VM template in our vCloud public catalog. So I'm going to just enter test VM. I'm going to fill my computer name. I'm telling it to spin up from template VM. You also have the option of selecting a new VM, just like with the old interface. You would just need to either ask vCloud to give you an image for that new VM for that custom OS, or you would need to upload your own through the upload tool. So we have our VM selected here. It gives you a little preview of what the resources are going to look like. This is the storage policy it'll use, and this is the amount of compute resources it'll grab. Hit OK here. I'm actually going to throw a 2 on here just to make sure that flash names. I'm going to create. So it's going to tell me to wait for a second, and then it will spin up the VM in our tasks menu down here. Once it's able to grab the template from our public catalog. So I'm not going to make you guys wait until it's done. I'm actually going to X out of here just so you can see the running task. This is probably the last bit of new interface material that I'd like to point out to you guys. Just this recent tasks menu. It's going to be a little bit more visible and easier to access than the old interface. You'll be able to see exactly what the progress of each of these tasks are. You'll be able to click into them and get a little bit more information. You can see this is running. So this is good diagnostic information. If you run into any problems, any tasks that are failing, you'll be able to turn that information in the form of a ticket to vCloud support. And that way we have all the information we need to troubleshoot it on the back end. So you can see this new VM that I've created is here. It's stopped. These VMs are going to, just like in the old interface, they're going to show up powered off. So in order to power this on, I would just go to actions power on here. I'm going to stop right here because you've already seen the running VM. And that's actually going to be all the content for the demos. I'm going to hop back over to the presentation here so we can go ahead and get into the Q&A. Just 1 second. All right, so those were the workflow demos. Just to recap that, what we went over here is managing users and permissions. We created a routed network, or we looked at how that interacted with the Edge gateway, and we created a VM from the vCloud public catalog template. So now we can go ahead and move on to questions. If anybody has any questions for us, let's see. So I see one about whether or not vCloud supports two-factor authentication. vCloud supports LDAP. So if you have two-factor authentication set up with your LDAP, you are able to utilize two-factor authentication for people authenticating into vCloud because it just authenticates back to your Active Directory. So if you have two-factor enabled, yes, you can do two-factor with vCloud. See, how would you upload a Hyper-V image to vCloud Director? So that's a pretty deep question, in that Hyper-V is a completely different hypervisor platform from VMware. We're a primarily VMware shop. Actually, we're all VMware. So what you need to do is grab an image of the individual VM, so not the hypervisor itself, but the individual VM running. You have to grab a VMware compatible image, so like an OBF or an OVA, or you would need to use third-party software, like for instance StorageCraft, to grab an image of that VM in order to import it into vCloud. We have a managed services department. Our service delivery department is very familiar with the VM migration and import process. So we can help you with that, but as far as grabbing the initial image, that's going to be the best way to get started on importing Hyper-V image. So we're also seeing whether or not the old interface is going to be available. The old interface is going to be running in parallel for a while with this new interface. It's just going to be two different URLs. We actually have some knowledge base articles on how to access the two different interfaces if you're just more comfortable with the old one. That'll still be available for a little while. That's eventually going to get deprecated, so I definitely recommend everybody move over to the interface when they're comfortable. Now, you're not going to lose any functionality. You're only going to gain features. All it is getting used to some new buttons and processes. So I see someone send me documentation about the LDAP integration. Yeah, we have some knowledge base articles that we can send out. We'll send those out with the link to the recording of this webinar after we're done, so we can definitely shoot those over. So if no one else has any other questions, if we need to follow up later, we can. But that's pretty much all that I have for you guys today. So thank you so much for showing up. Thanks for listening to us. This has been vCloud 9.7. I'm Alex from GreenCloud. And again, if call-in users, if you were here and not visible in the guest list, only if you were a call-in user, go ahead and you can email in for that gift card. That's katie@gogreencloud.com. When is the new interface going live? It's live right now. You can access this new interface by going to a specific URL. We'll include a knowledge base link to how to get that URL, but instead of going to your address .com/cloud/org, it's going to be /10. It's just a replacement.
Yeah, you can take a snapshot. Can you take a snapshot? Yes, you can still take the snapshot like you could in the old interface. You just have to make sure you have the storage to accommodate that snapshot. Let's see. We got a few more questions here that we might have missed. PowerShell allow snapshot creation.
I don't think you have access to do snapshots through the command line.
Not through PowerShell.
No, so PowerShell would be running on the individual VM, and snapshots occur at a hypervisor level.
Yeah.
So those snapshots, because those snapshots happen on the storage array, the VM doesn't actually know what storage array it's on. It only knows about the disk. So the snapshot would be done through vCloud, not through PowerShell. All right. Thanks so much, everybody.